today we're going to be addressing the question of preservation, how the Greek New Testament that we have today is 99.99% reflective of the original. And this is a Greek New Testament. It's not modern Greek. This is Nestle Allen Greek New Testament. I'm not sure what edition this is. It's an older edition. There's a newer edition now. We're going to talk about why there would be newer editions that would come out. It has to do with finding new manuscripts and adding them to. And if you look, I don't know if you can actually see this, but yeah, you can. There's a line right here in it, and this is the Greek text above, and below the line is notation on textual variants. So this is all, if anybody accuses Christians of saying, hey, you guys are, just not paying attention to this at all, it's all there. This is all very much out in the open. This is something we're talking about. It's nothing new. And the question is, does this threaten anything of theology or anything that's in Christianity, anything that's going to be a bother to the authoritative word of God? Is it reliable? We took a poll for this, and I'm going to bring the poll up and take a look at it. And I asked in the poll, was the Bible preserved or corrupted? And we had over 101 responses. 93% said preserved, 7% said corrupted. And I asked specifically in this to specify, if you say corrupted, please let us know what it was that was corrupted, what and where. And I really didn't get much of a response for that for people who said it was corrupted. I got one.
Now, having 101 responses gives us a good, easy number for the number of people who said that was corrupted, which is 7.
That's right.
So 7 said it was corrupted. The question is, when, where, and how?
Well, I did get one response, and that was the second one from the bottom, and it says, humans, well, I have to kind of read because out of way here. Humans will up 100% of the stuff we put our hands on. Hard to imagine where it was all preserved without being corrupt. And it's an honest answer. You're saying, listen.
Well, the problem with that is then you've got everything. We can't know anything about history.
That is correct.
It would be everything. All historical documents must be corrupt then based upon that assumption. Now, he's right. We do mess a lot of stuff up that we put our hands to, and it takes us a long time to get back to the original.
Right. And that's what this is. That's what we're doing with textual criticism, is that there is a real science, a real process. I mean, we've been doing this for well over 100 years, piecing it together, looking at how we would get back to what the original documents would have said. So it took another poll here. And in this poll, this is more recent, asked the question, when is the earliest copy of a passage, extant textual fragment, that'd be the technical term, of the New Testament? And in this, I'm asking the question, not of an entire book, just of a fragment. And I'm not asking when it was written, but the earliest copy that we have of this. How far back does it go? The first century, around 25 to 3 AD, 29%, 66% said the second century, 5% said 3rd to 5th century, and 1% said later than the 5th century. And again, this is close to, well, it's 87 votes. And so I would say probably 1% would be one person. I mean, you can't have anything less than that. So it could be 2, maybe, but probably one person said later than the 5th century. But the majority said 2nd century, and that is the correct answer. We'll look at the actual text that were used for each one of these in the poll. Some of the responses I got on this, some of the comments were well said. I really appreciate these comments. So somebody set me straight that Ethan Thompson said, I feel slightly awkwardly sorry for the currently 13 votes for the earliest extant manuscript being before Jesus' death. And so
Yes.
now this is the problem. There's another comment on here that pointed this out to me, that there's only a bit of an option here that you're saying first century, but then you're also narrowing it down in the same thing. They could have chosen the first option because they only read the first century and not that specific time frame before Jesus' birth. And Villainous said that there's a gap from 30 AD to 25 AD. Is this on purpose? Pretty sure we got some fragments from the 90s, and that's we don't. There's nothing dated to the 90s. There's something slightly after that, but it's close. So let us take a look at each one of these. What would you have said for the dates? I mean, if you were to guess what century, this is a little bit unfair. Second century. Okay, you've done some studies on this before. So what have you seen for when you first started studying this? Were you surprised about any of these dates, or was there anything about this whole thing that would have surprised you?
Other than what we'll mention later on, which is just the pure number of manuscripts in comparison to any other historical document ever. That was a bit shocking.
Like which other historical documents are you thinking about? Any. Okay, so what do you mean by that?
Any other historical documents of the current timeline, of current comparable time period. The writings of Homer, or any other of the historical documents that we have that we know events have happened from those.
Okay. And we're going to take a look at those in a bit and compare it to the manuscripts that we have for the Bible. So is the New Testament preserved or corrupted? And so I have an infographic up. I kind of want to focus in on this first part, the blue part, because that shows when Jesus' ministry was. You have the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, written between 50 and 70 AD. And then you have Paul's letters between 40 and 60s. You have Acts that's written between 60 and 75. The book of Hebrews, 60 and 80. And the Gospel of John, much later, between 70 and 95 AD. He was the youngest apostle. He lived the longest, possibly not martyred. We don't know for sure, although he was imprisoned on the island of Patmos, which is where he wrote the book of Revelation. So all of that would have been within the first century. And then after the first century, we would have had the manuscripts. The first one we have in the poll was what would be called P46. Now, all these infographics that I have up that I'm showing you, these are really kind of cool. These were from a guy named Wesley Huff. And I'm going to give a shout out to him at the end of this video and show you his website. He's got some really good material here. It's also in the description. I have information about his site in the description. He has a YouTube channel and his own site where he's done a lot of work in pulling this together. So this is P46. It was discovered somewhere in the Fayum of Egypt near the ruins of a monastery. And it's one of our earliest collected manuscripts. Instead of being a single independent document, it is a grouping of Pauline epistles. So the first one I showed on the poll wasn't first century. It was second to third century. And by the way, this is a really cool document. This is on some of the thumbnails that I've had for the videos. This is the one that's shown. So this is actual manuscript that is there. And then very early on, the four Gospels and the Pauline epistles were being grouped together in collection of codices pointing to their significance together. So you have the Gospels and the Pauline epistles early on, before the Bible was canonized, before all the books were pulled together. You have transmitted together from group to group, Paul and the Gospels. So if there's any questions about that, these were put together early on. All that was done during the canonization is just confirming, say, yeah, this is it. We're making this official. It's already being done. We're just making it official. The second manuscript that was in the poll was the earliest. This is the earliest, as far as we know, manuscripts discovered. This infographic shows great detail. Again, Egypt, Shows it in the John Rylands library. It was written in Greek. It's on papyrus. And this is 2nd century, between 125 and 160. That's the date. Possibly the earliest partial copy of a book in the New Testament. And it has a portion of the Greek Gospel of John, specifically John 18:31 through 33 and 18:37 through 38. Now, if it looks like it's kind of weird that they're both cut out the same, it's because one is the front and the other is the back. It shows it's just one piece that has a front and back, so it's written on both sides of it. That's why it's shaped the way it is. And this fragment is housed in John Rylands Library, like I said, in Manchester, England. The next one is on the poll. We had Codex Alexandrinus, and that is 5th century. It's 1,500 years, and it's nearly complete Bible. One of the oldest Genesis to Revelations copies that we have in one book. And when we say that it's near almost complete, is because not because of omissions, but it's due to physical damage and lost pages. And the last one on the poll was Codex Zachantheus, 6th century. And this was another codex. Now, the codex is another word for book, that somewhere around the 500s, you started seeing more in book form than you did individual pages, where the papyrus would be not just the material that's being used, but it's also individual sheets, where then they were bound together in a book form, sewn together. So this was brought to England in 1821 and transferred to Cambridge in 1985. So all these documents are preserved. All of them, you can go to specific libraries or museums and see them. Now, of course, you're not going to be able to rifle through them by your hands, but they're all there. I'm going to pause and take a look for any questions or anything.
That's probably been in the chat.
Oh, we do. Good.
Yep.
Good. Yeah, because this is just answering the poll, and then we're going to dive into basically the science of textual criticism. I say science. There's a bit of an art form here too, but this is a type of archaeology where you go through and you say, okay, we've got these documents now. We want to kind of backtrace to see what the originals would have been based on that. So comments. Okay, peace to everyone. Might just go ahead and throw some of these up. Just basically high stuff, and then I think
is it then corrupted or just not complete? Just not complete is the answer.
Not complete for what? What do you mean?
Probably it was one of the earlier manuscripts that you were talking about. I know.
Oh, yes.
That it wasn't. It's not completely.
So it was originally, and this was. Gosh, I'd have to go back and take a look.
Scroll down new comments.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Pretty sure this one's the one you're thinking of. Yeah. So it was Vaticanus, Sinaiticus. It was the earliest complete codex that we have, earliest complete Bible. The problem with being complete, it's not like, well, they left out Hebrews, therefore Hebrews is questionable. It's not that. It's that physically it was damaged, or some of the pages fell out and were lost. You can imagine like an old Bible that you have, some parts, maybe a timeline or something like that came out of the front and you can't find it anymore. It makes you mad because that was your favorite timeline ever that was in there. But it's that type of thing. It's not because something was omitted. They don't have chapter 7 of Matthew or something like that. It's because of physical damage that was done to it.
And there's a lot of things that have happened to it since then. I mean, seriously, the travel it must have gone through in order to get to where it is currently. It's a rough road.
Yeah, you think like
multiple wars.
This happens with modern documents. I think it's in the U.S. Census. We take census every 10 years. There was you can go back and do genealogical studies, and I've done that. There is one decade where the census is lost, and I think it's like 1880 or 1890. It was because of, I think it was a fire or something, where the U.S. census was lost, and this is before digitization. So it's after the printing press, but you have this document, unless there's been copies made, there's that fire, it gets wiped out, it's done. You don't have it anymore. And so that information has been lost. So they're talking about it, even in modern documents where that's done. Even in the age of digitization, we might be more at risk now with some things, because if we say, oh, it's on the internet, just go and check it out, somebody can go on there and change that page
very easily.
And you have, I think there's
code.
There is a website that's the Wayback website where
you can look back at some of the historical points on websites and be able to backtrack some of it.
Yeah, but this data can be lost. And if we rely, this is a real lesson for us right now. If we rely just purely on the digital age and say, well, it's out there, and not have a backup document, who knows? Government, some organization, some individual can go in there and make that change. Amazing to, I think he's responding to what I have. If you guys don't mind, if you could say what is amazing. It's probably my face.
Oh, I thought it was my haircut.
That's amazing. Yes, the mop that was on top of his head has disappeared. It's no longer there.
My wife found the clippers, and I fell asleep. And
and he's lost his strength. He no longer has.
Reenacting some of the biblical stories there.
Yes. We won't go into too much detail. It's very bad. Zakynthos. Island in Greece, right next to Homer's Ithaca and Lefkas. Me. Yay! Threatened sanity. So back in your backyard is what you're saying. That's fantastic. I love it. Cool. I've got to go visit. I mean, I was there many years ago, not on those islands, but in some other islands. I would love to go back. And that'd be fantastic. Just go there as a tour. See some of these historical sites. I wonder when the Old Testament was completed. We're going to go over that. We're going to look at both the New Testament and the Old Testament, talk about preservation, talk about authorship, talk about transmission, and canonization, when this was all collected. We're going to touch on the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is a huge find.
That is
huge.
Massive.
Holy cow. And that goes to show you, too, that we are still, this is not a dead and finished science. There is still cataloging and digitization that's going on right now with manuscripts that are made. So we're pulling this together. This is an active field of research. And as these discoveries are being made, they're added. Like I said, this is an older version of the Greek New Testament. This is 1980s. Like I said, I'd have to look it up, but there are new editions of this out now, which have some extra fine. Now, this is, it's only been a little bit that's been added, some refinement, and it's not like, oh, we're changing Matthew now, the entire text of Matthew's. No. It's just adding some more clarity to some of the variants that might be in there, and that's what we're going to be looking at in more detail here in a minute.
I mean, the number of manuscripts we keep discovering and the rate that we're discovering it, just as a point of reference, a friend of mine, Dr. Eddie Dalcour, he said he has to redo, keep his books up to date on the number of manuscripts that have been discovered. And he has to keep releasing revisions on that because it's just so many and so rapid that we're just discovering these.
Now, these are not game changers that the new discoveries we found. There might be variants in spelling. There might be We'll cover some of the textual variants that are there. I'm thinking about one, and if we dig in, okay. So little plug here: go to my Patreon page, jump on board the team, help us determine how deep we're going to go on this.
Yeah,
because we need to. I need to find out what you guys want, and I can get feedback from the chat or from comments that are made, but I don't know if these are people that are really serious or some troll that's on here just saying, oh, you guys should really discover look into the Gospel of Thomas and get into we want some really good heresy. No, I want to know serious direction on this. And if somebody jumps on Patreon, I'm considering that as something to be serious. So do we need to go deeper? We're going to be doing a lot of material this morning, but there's only so much we can cover in one video. And should we look at actual text in the Bible to say, this is what this variant says, this is what this variant says? We're not sure. And
doesn't make a difference.
Does it make a difference? Pull it apart, see where they are. And I think the answer is probably yes. The question is, was that?
It doesn't actually change the
no
message.
No, we're gonna.
None of the variants change the message.
So this is a discussion. This is like you're sitting down with your doctor and says, you've got a medical problem here. And doc, is it serious? Well, and you want your doctor to be honest with you. You just don't want to pat on your back and say, well, everything's going to be okay. If you've got terminal cancer, you want to find out. He doesn't care about hurting your feelings. I mean, he's going to soft pedal a little bit, but you want the truth. And so we want to look closely at this and say, if there's some issues with the New Testament, if it was just put together by scribes in the Middle Ages, I want to know that. I want to know if what I am basing my theology, my life on, if there's problems with it. Because if it is, I'm going to have to re-examine this whole thing. And so we want to come and look at this with integrity. And so that's where the digging in comes in. So I'm going to put in, so Villainous says, my Bible is falling apart. It's only 20 years old. So yeah, it's by use. Okay, we're going to talk about this here in a little bit about the use and constant use. You could keep your Bible perfectly preserved if you don't read it. It's probably a good sign that it's falling apart because it says you're actually reading it, right? And I'm just going to pop up a couple. Cool. Yeah, is cool. He said, if I remember correctly, the earliest complete Old Testament in Hebrew. Oh, okay. Old Testament in Hebrew is Codex Leningrad, the oldest complete Greek copy it is one of the big three: Sinaiticus, Alexandrinus, and Vaticanus. Yes. And we're not gonna be looking at those specifically because we're looking at the earlier ones, but all these feed in. There is. And I'm going to ask you guys before we get to it, guess how many manuscripts there are. And what the heck, guess how many variants there are. We'll answer those questions here in a minute. And man, we are just pumping through with these. This is a personal note to you. That's not a haircut. That's 3 days of growth.
That's haircut.
Holy cow. I just would have gone for a trim. I wouldn't have gone for the whole thing, but yeah.
Hey,
yeah,
it feels good.
If you do it like once a year,
I don't even have to worry about the hat falling off anymore when the wind comes because it's like Velcro. It attaches. It's like super glue. It's like
oh, it's cool. Blessing. I hope everything goes well for you at work. We'll catch up with you later, and then how would you Qur'an stunt? You have to say, give it to me straight talk. Yeah. If we just gloss over this and say, I don't want to look, then we are not being, it's going to be always bugging us in the back, nagging doubts with this. Let's look, open eyes, 100%. Let's get some real data here and find out what the texts are, what the manuscripts are. What do they say? Is there anything that really threatens my faith? I want to know. And then after that, if it doesn't, then I have a firmer foundation I feel I can stand on. And any accusations that are made, you can go back and you can pull up this information and say, hey, not so fast. And I'm just going to do a couple more here.
Bye-bye.
Just saying goodbye there. And yes. Okay. So digging back into this. So we looked at the poll. And so I want to talk a little bit about tools of the trade. Before we dive in too much, we've been using words like manuscript, originals, and variants. Let's talk about what the definitions of those are so we have a clear understanding going forward of what that is. A manuscript, just like the word sounds, manual, hand, written script. Manuscript is a handwritten copy, and that was the only way to copy documents before the printing press was invented around 1440 AD. So before the invention of the printing press, the only way that you can make a copy of a document was by handwriting. As everybody knows, that is prone to mistakes. Copying, you invert letters, you copy the wrong things down, you have a spelling error because you always think of a word a certain way. If it's spoken, if it's dictated to you and you're copying it down that way, there might be another type of error that you would make. All these type of things that are going. And we want to make sure that we weed out any intentional changes that are in there as well. A scribe says, well, do this. We talked last week about marginal notes that are put in the side that get incorporated into the text. Somebody makes a little note there. Somebody else describes it. Oh, was that something that was omitted last time? Was it supposed to be in there? Because they'll do that. If they'll miss a line, they'll have in the marginal notes to say, oops, I skipped a line. Here it is, and put that in. So then you have another term is originals. These are the technical term for the originals would be the autographs, handwritten. I don't use that term because people might be confused to think, oh, it was a Babe Ruth's autograph. You know, you have some celebrity that has given you his signature with maybe a nice little note. That's how we use autograph usually, but that is the technical term for the originals. Now, none of them has survived as far as we know. Hopefully that's not a game changer for you.
Well, yet. Again, we're discovering so many new ones. We'll find out.
Right.
But considering that it's passed and that these were written on organic paper, it's not, unless we got like Dead Sea Scroll events happening.
Yes. So we have a lot of manuscripts talking about Dead Sea Scrolls. Manuscripts actually come out of Egypt. Now, one of the advantages of Egypt, it's dry. You could preserve, you more likely preserve paper type documents, papyrus, vellum, different types of materials last longer in that environment, especially if they're stored in a cooler space, like what happened with the Dead Sea Scrolls in a cave. They'll tend to last longer. But the originals, the autographs, were transferred. So say, hey, you got a letter from Paul. I want to see that. I want to have my, get a copy of that. And so then it would be handled. And you can imagine over time that would degrade.
There's also another way that some of the manuscript copy errors would occur is if on the edge of a page, definitely on the turning side, you'll have fingers constantly rubbing it, and you'll get like the last letter in a line be like, oh shit, or the last
smudged
number
or something, or
smudge, and be like, and then the scribe comes to copy and it's like, that was best guess. But then we see that because we got so many other copies, we can cross-reference and see the change very plainly, and even track it down to the individual person who did it.
That's true.
Which is also impressive. So if you ever screwed up on it, we will find you.
That's right. So we have a definition for manuscripts, originals, and textual variants is any place in the manuscript where there is a difference in the wording when compared to another manuscript. Now, this does not include capitalization and punctuation. If you look at some of the earlier manuscripts, they're all capitalized letters. There's no punctuation. And in some cases, there's no spaces. They just go one to one to one, just bleeds in. And that was a process they used for saving papyrus, because unlike today, it was more uncommon. It was not cheap. It was a medium that was harder to come by than what we have today. So we have. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with these terms. There's another term that I want to talk about, is counting the variants. We can count the variant by characteristic, but not by the number of times that appears in copies. What I mean is this: if a variant is discovered in a text that reads Jesus Christ instead of Christ Jesus, that counts as one. If you find more texts that read in that family, so ones that would have followed that were copied from that one that had the inversion, that still only, as Gimli says, still only counts as one. So in counting, you just have copies, and copies, and copies. Those other copies from that were not counted as variants because they're not varying from that previous one. So I want to take a look at comparing ancient manuscripts. And this is a huge deal. You had spoken about this earlier.
Yes, this is the thing that surprised me the most.
Okay. So I want to say a real quick word before I jump into that, is we want to take a look and say, oh man, the Bible's been corrupted. Look at this. Any ancient text, especially before the printing press, you have a chance of any of these. You have a greater chance of these variations than you do after the printing press. So I want to compare the New Testament manuscripts to other ancient manuscripts and do a side by side to say, how does this stack up? And we're going to look at how soon the manuscripts were made after the originals would have been written. Now remember, no to have the originals anymore. We have copies of the originals. And how soon after does those first originals, like we did in the poll, appear at those manuscripts? How soon after the originals did those manuscripts appear? And the closer they are, the better guarantee that they are representation of whatever the originals were. Okay, so too many screens. All right, comparing the ancient manuscripts. Now, this is from the Institute of New Testament Textual Research Center in Münster, Germany. This is where they do a lot of work, and we'll talk about this later. I'll give you a link. It's in the description, and we'll also talk about a shout out here at the end of the live stream. So you have a list of ancient works. You have the earliest manuscripts, and then you have the total manuscript list, the total number. And you can see how the New Testament is the closest we have, 125 AD, and there are over 5,856 manuscripts as compared to, I don't know what you'd say the average is on most of the last one with Homer's Iliad kind of throws it because it has 1,900. But it seems like the median is somewhere around 250 manuscripts available for some of these other ancient writings, where for the New Testament, it just blows it out of the water. It doesn't even compare. If we were to put this on a bar chart, you would see how the New Testament, evidence for the New Testament is the king. Nothing else comes close to this. And you'd have to take a look and do a couple of mental calculations to find out how long after the original was written before you have the earliest manuscript. Tacitus Annals, it were written somewhere around 110 AD. The earliest manuscript we have for that is 850 to 1050. So 750 years would have been the earliest. 700. You imagine about the difference in time, 750 years. Now, that doesn't mean that was the first time somebody wrote it down. That just means that's the earliest one that we have evidence for.
So you said 750 years.
About that, yeah.
750 years. So we would be looking at 1300s.
Right.
Would be a comparison between that gap to now. So between just a show and comparison between those two, that is a massive chunk of history.
Right.
Both world wars, huge amount of.
You are in the middle ages. In my first novel, there is the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa in Spain, which is a key point in the Reconquista of Spain, where they're pushing the Moors back out of Spain. And that battle happened in 1212, 800 years ago. So it would have been similar, well within the time frame, the gap this has here, because we're talking the earliest that this would have been for this particular document, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and you can go through and look at these others. So when we're talking about reliability of the New Testament in terms of its transmission, the New Testament is king in terms of number of manuscripts and distance from the original. So like Homer's Iliad, we have 800 BC, and the earliest manuscript is 415 BC.
That is a large jump.
Yeah, and if you were to study the Iliad and the Odyssey in university, questions of transmission and preservation, I would doubt that would ever come up in the lecture at all. We don't question Homer's Iliad, but we question the New Testament. And that's the other thing that goes on here too, is there's an incredible amount of scrutiny that goes over the New Testament. And it's been challenged and challenged and challenged and challenged and challenged and challenged again, yet still comes out as being good.
And the majority of those challenges were from Christians themselves.
Yeah.
On investigating it, being critical on it, where it's coming from, where these variants are rooted. Every part of that comes from the Christians who are examining it.
Yeah. I'm looking at some of the we're proud of
that.
I want to make sure.
Well reference.
Oh, okay.
We're proud of that.
Yeah, you did a pretty good rendition. Man, there's a lot of comments here. I hope. Okay, I want to make sure that I pick up the right ones here. Not that one. Bach thought it was corrupted in 1400. Do you know who that is?
No.
Okay, so I guess somebody thought it was corrupted in 1400.
There's a lot of people in history, just to let you know.
Yeah, but this would have been somebody in particular. Perhaps if you could clarify who that was in the chat, then I can, because I'm not, there's probably somebody I should know, but I don't. Okay. Far four. How do you know about him? He was murdered. And some of this is chat just going on inside the chat room. So I don't know who all is, why Paul and Thesia was left out. Okay. Sorry, guys. I just want to make sure I catch some of your. I wonder how we would identify original from a copy. Okay. Adam, I think this is a good question. So could it be that maybe one of the earlier manuscripts that we looked at would have been maybe one of the originals? Wow. That's a good question. Hadn't thought about that.
Well, it counts on when it's dated to. Now that dating, as you were pointing out earlier, before we started the discussion, was that they are looking at writing styles. They are looking at other things on this, because I pointed out that a lot of times with these, either papyrus or animal skins, depending on what they're written down on, some of these are manufactured and then put on the shelf for quite a while before pulled out and actually used. So you have to go off of more the writing style and when the ink itself is dated too.
Yeah, see, I would have thought that maybe carbon-14 dating would be used, but then I'm not sure what the resolution and accuracy is of that. Can you get down to actual, is this like general speaking? I can tell maybe the general century if that, or can I get down to something tighter? And I don't think you can. I think they have to rely on other.
Yeah, memory serves with that. Crowd dating like that. You have it's within plus or minus a couple hundred years.
Yeah. So
nothing precise.
Adam, this is a very good question. I don't know what the answer is to it, but that's an awesome question. Maybe it'd be awesome. Yeah, we already do have one of the originals, and we don't know it. Also, they didn't have efficient light.
If you're copying it down and you're late at night,
yes,
and all you have to go is that little flickering candle and your eyeballs.
That's right. And especially for me, I squint at the text because it's a little bit harder for me to read. And I'm too prideful to put on my reading glasses in front of you all.
And they didn't have those. In
no, they didn't.
Quantities.
So we also have unpopular opinion. I don't think anyone will refute how old the corruption refers to when they chose. Okay, I'm giving up. I do. Oh, wow. Words. Unpopular opinion. I don't think anyone will refute how old this is. The corruption refers to what is chosen to be included. In English is not his or her first language. So to be included, not included in the Bible during those 2024 years. Okay. So I guess what you're saying here is not so much the physical preservation of the paper itself, but you're referring to what gets included in the canon. And we're not talking about canon right now. That's another topic that would be good to bring up because it's one of the 5 that we spoke about earlier. It could be included in that. That's a good point. Nicodemus Serpio said, so the Muslims failed to burn those manuscripts too, like they did at the Great Library of Alexandria. Yes, apparently so. Well, they were trying to replicate what they did to their own scripture, I guess, by burning it. And maybe they were thinking they were doing everybody a favor by burning the Library of Alexandria. I'm not going to pronounce his name right. So this is what you were, the person you were referring to earlier who said 1400. My glasses aren't helping with this one. Hieronymus Bosch. I do not know who that is, but I will have to look it up. The choice of what is and is not canonical is not divine, is human. This is where the corruption objection comes from, I think. Because
that would be what people are pointing to. The Council of Nicaea, but a lot of these manuscripts, as we've shown, predate that by quite some time.
Yeah. We can go over what the rules of canonization are. One was that needed to be an apostle that wrote it. And I don't know. I would consider canonization part of inspiration here, part of God putting this together. But we would say that for another live stream.
And most of the objections, you got some that would hold on to the Council of Nicaea being it. Thaddeus from Reason Answers basically has a rule of thumb. You bring up the Council of Nicaea, he's like, you know nothing of what you're talking about, because a lot of it didn't have to deal with it's not that they were making these books. They were already there. They're just saying, here we go.
And as we've seen with some of these collections, they were already being passed along as groups early.
Oh yeah, you had
early on.
Peshidu, if I'm saying that right, or Peshidu, in Saudi Arabia, in that area at that time, and it did not include every book that's in the canonization of that's canonized in the Bible, but it included the main message of it.
Okay.
And that was the point of it, was to have the main message of it. And that's dated back to at least one of the earlier manuscripts of it. I think 2nd century.
Okay. So continuing with this, then we have, we're looking at comparing these different manuscripts. Let's look at manuscript content. contents. Most of the manuscripts only contain the Gospels. Now, these, again, manuscripts are the handwritten copies, early. Only 61 manuscripts that are complete New Testaments from Matthew through Revelation. The earliest of these was written in AD 350, was known as Codex Sinaiticus. This was mentioned. One of the people in live chat mentioned this. There's a whole history behind this too that's very interesting too. Did he save this? The guy who was the archaeologist who went in, it was a monastery on Mount Sinai. I think it was St. Catherine's. Did he save it or did he steal it? There's even today, there's a little bit of sleuthing that's going on to try to figure out what's going on with that. But this does. Now, I wanted to make a note here. When we're talking about these manuscripts, we're just looking at the Greek manuscripts. It doesn't cover the languages that the New Testament was translated into. Now, Greek was the original and translated into Latin, Coptic, Syriac, Georgian, Armenian, and other languages. Latin is one of the biggest. We could also look at Latin and say, okay, here you have support for the New Testament being written way back at this time because you have this. You also have support for church fathers commenting about different books of the Bible, and they even quote passages out of the New Testament. So there's an external confirmation that's there very early. This is not something that was made up in the early Middle Ages, late Middle Ages, or something like that. This is something that we know that was written way back, and we, like I said earlier, we are 99.99% sure. We are sure of that much of the material that's here. It is what the apostles originally wrote. Okay, textual variants. Let's talk about those real quickly. There are, now brace yourself for this, is a huge number, but we're going to put it in perspective. There are 138,162 words in the Greek New Testament. There are about 400,000 New Testament variants in 5,898 Greek New Testament manuscripts. That sounds like a huge number, and it averages out to 2.5 variants per word. But let's put that in perspective. Of those 400,000 plus, those are found in close to 6,000 Greek manuscripts. The Greek New Testament that we have is 99.99% reflective of the original. And we can say that because one reason is that, take this off the screen here and just look at it directly. One reason is we have so many manuscripts. We have 6,000 manuscripts. Any little change, any little nuance that's in there, all hand copied, that you're going to have, you can have a variant that was do that. Now, how important are those variants? That's the other thing that we're going to look at. We say, oh, all those variants that are in there, it's definitely corrupted. No, it's not. We can take a look at that and we can extrapolate where the original text would have been based on that.
Well, it also goes to how we perceive or how we look at the Bible itself. Is this the, like Muslims would claim of the Qur'an, the direct word of God itself, given to humanity,
dropped down out of heaven,
preserved by God himself? No, this isn't the inspired word of God. This is, people were inspired by the Holy Spirit in order to write this, and that is prone to these small errors. And the main point of it is the message itself.
Is the message intact?
So has the message changed? No.
Right.
Are any of these variants, again, like we've shown, is it Christ Jesus or Jesus Christ? Does that change it? No. Absolutely no.
Okay.
It doesn't matter one way or the other.
So my question on preservation is this. I have here a Greek New Testament, and I can make a marginal note. I'm not actually writing. Make a marginal note or cross out a word here and put another word or something, And then if transfer this to somebody, I have just changed doing that, or even taking a page and then ripping it out. I have changed the Bible. Okay, I have modified it. I can burn sections. I can physically, I won't do that, but I can physically do that to this. There is nothing physically keeping me from doing that. I am not being struck by a meteor out of heaven. I am not suddenly dying of a heart attack. I am not, God is not keeping me from doing that. I could do it, right? And so because God allows free will for man, and also any kind of mistakes that people can make, that is allowed. We can make those mistakes. So it's mistakes made by man in transmission. That's the issue, right? Yes. I would challenge any Muslim, if that cannot be done to the Quran. If this was the Quran here, is anything keeping me from ripping out a page? Is anything keeping me from writing stuff in there? Okay, so we know that is a possibility. So that level of preservation is not what we're talking about here, right? No,
and they would. The problem is they're not consistent about that claim, because they would claim that the book is holy and that it is preserved, and anyone that you can see why, because no one would dare defile it, and then people did defile it, and then they're like, we've got it all memorized, so don't worry about it. We got it taken care of. It's like, okay, don't move the goal. So back to what your original point was, that we're preserving the message. Preserving the message, and this is why it can be translated into multiple different languages. And this is one of them, again, huge issues with Islam is, and this is the go-to for Muslims, is you can't really understand it unless you know the Arabic itself, because it's in the original language that's magical. And it's like, no, the message that God gave us in the Gospels is for all mankind. It was written in the common language of the age in order to reach the maximum amount of people. And still today, the message is king, trying to get it out to people. Okay, so excellent point, and that's necessary to keep in mind when looking at all this. And then asking the big question is, of all these variants that are there, do any of them make a difference, a doctrinal difference? Is there any doctrinal issue that is being saying, like doctrinal, I'm talking about teaching in the Bible, anything that Jesus said, like if you Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the peacemakers. If instead of saying blessed are the peacemakers, he said blessed are the jihadis that go out and conquer the world. That would be the Sermon on the Mount by Muhammad, and not the Sermon on the Mount by Jesus. And it would make a big difference if you said something like that. So the question is, are there any variants that go along those lines? And we'll take a look at that in a bit. Before we do, I wanted to take a gander. Throwing one more thing in there, the variants that the Muslims would have to have is that in proof that Jesus came, he claimed to only be a prophet, and then that was later changed at some point using variants to be that Jesus is the Son of God, that he is God incarnate, and the concept of the Trinity would have to have been added on later on. Yeah, there'd be a huge, so to make that'd be a huge rewrite. So the claim made by Muslims is that the message that Jesus gave was the same message that Muhammad gave, right? Just to different people, to a different group, different people, language, different time frame. Yep. And so he gave the same message. Muhammad came by and repeated that same message as it was given to him by the archangel Gabriel to him, so that the same thing would have been given to Jesus, right? And that was entirely different. Jesus was not given that. The disciples wrote the Bible, and that's one thing that Muslims say. What book did Jesus write? Well, he didn't. So you would have to make the Gospels at least in line with what the Quran says. You'd have to change so much. You'd have to, I mean, how much percentage wise would you say that would have to be changed for it to be in line with even the tone, everything? 85 to 90. Yeah. Percent of it, you'd have to rip out the whole concept of God dwelling with us, the concept of the relationship, because you do not have that in Islam, the concept of the temple all the priesthood, all of that would have to be gone and erased. And basically all you have left are a couple of prophets and God being the only God. So that would be about it. That'd be all you'd have left from it. New Testament, most of the New Testament would have to be gone. Just whatever they happen to like to try to point to Muhammad or claim that Muhammad was there.
Yeah, you probably end up with just maybe 3 or 4 pages left of the New Testament. And we know, going back using contextual criticism, there's no way. That's not even close. All right, so we have, I'm going to put up a couple of chats here. Threat Insanity said, Islam is wrong in its entirety. You cannot fix it. You have to delete and rewrite. Yeah, and talking about making this align with Christianity, it doesn't fit. These puzzle pieces don't work together. And Villainous said, gold tablets, yes, like handing down. Now, these are like the tablets given to Moses. We do not have that handed down to us as the New Testament written down, and we're proud of that. Yes.
You get squeakier.
You do.
You get squeakier.
We're proud of that. There you go.
You get squeakier with it. Because that's how it goes.
I do have a clarification here, and this is about the name that we were looking at earlier. You clarified and said, Stunt said, this was an artist, and clarified here, given the full name, scattered throughout his work. So just to point that out quickly.
Now, the golden tablets thing, is that referring to Joseph Smith?
Oh.
And the whole revelations there, which
the
oddly enough,
Book of Mormon?
Yep, parallel a lot of Muhammad.
Yeah, it does. There's a lot of parallel between Islam and Mormonism.
Creepy a level, almost like they weren't coming from the same playbook.
Yeah, that is kind of weird. So textual variants. After 500 years of dozens of world-renowned textual scholars working to restore the original words of the original text, between the 1881 Westcott and Hort Greek New Testament and the 2012 28th edition of the Nestle Allen Greek New Testament, and that's the one that I have. I don't have that edition. I have an earlier edition of it. So we're looking at the New Testament editions that were made. This is taking all the, and we have the notes of any variants down on the bottom. From 1881 to 2012, we have a 99.99% reflection of the originals. In fact, the 1881 Westcott and Hort Greek New Testament is 99.5% the same as the 2012 edition. So this is after all these other, any other variants that have come up in this meantime since 1881. There's still very little difference. All they would have done is they said, you know what, it looks like there's more evidence for this variant as being closer to the original as the others. So what are we looking at in terms of textual variants? You can break it down into 2 different categories, meaningful and viable. And here's a matrix to kind of show down. And what this matrix does is it takes that 400,000 and it breaks it down to just 1% of that original. That makes any that you need to actually look closer at. You can have something that is meaningful but not viable. And so the definitions of these are something that's meaningful is the variant changes the text to some degree. That actually makes a difference. And then viable is the variant has a distinct possibility of being the original wording. It's not something that you could look at and say, wow, that's just somebody really misspelled that word. That's not an issue. You can see, you can trace it back and it's not close. So you can put together the meaningful but not viable to throw that out, and neither meaningful nor viable, and to throw that out. And so what you're looking for is that bottom corner over there. It's both meaningful and viable. So if all those 400,000 variants how does that work down? So let's look at the it says 5. It should say 4. Whoops, I have a textual error. It should say 4 types of textual variants. And that was not me. It was him who did it. So no, it wasn't. It was me. I was the one. So now I'm broadcasting this through the internet. So how many variants are there now? We have, there's of the 5 types, we have omission. It's lacking one or more words. Addition, the opposite of omission, that you're adding one or more words. Transposition, you have a word order change. And the last type of a textual variance would be a substitution, replacing one or more words with other words. So taking a closer look at the first type, omissions and additions, the largest of these omissions or additions to the New Testament was 12 since 12 words. It should say, I think, 12 verses, not words. I got another textual problem here. It should say 12 verses found in 2 places in the New Testament. And we, if you guys want to, we'll take a look at those in another live stream. We've already gone so long on this one, but this is important information. We really need to take a close look at it. It's worth spending some extra time on it. We can dig into those variants, what they actually are, in another live stream, but let me know on the Patreon group if you really want to do that or not. So the 2 of these are 12 verses in 2 locations. That's it. That's all we have. Then you also have groupings of 1 or 2 verses, long omissions found in 12 places. Then phrases and individual words found in tens of thousands of places in the New Testament. So as you see, the bigger chunks, there's just 2 places where you have bigger chunks, and then we could take a look at those. Then phrases and individual words in tens of thousands of places, and finally letters and misspellings. Now I'll give you an example for this. It's called the movable nu. And threat insanity, you can tell us, since you're a Greek speaker, you can confirm this or not. I'm not sure if growing up speaking Greek, if they called it a movable nu. Of course, I'm using English words here, but the idea is it's a very common variant in the manuscripts. It comes up a lot. And this is where you get a lot of the spelling changes or variants with this. And it acts like in English, where we put an N, A-N, we use A-N instead of A in front of another word that starts with a vowel. So like, I have a car. And it's owned by an artist. Artist starts with A, it's a vowel. An is used instead of A. So it's just like in English, you have an N. In Greek, you have a nu, which is basically the N sound. And so here is an example of a word ending in SI. You can add a final nu to ease the pronunciation. So it's a pronunciation thing. We naturally speak this anyway. So if you're speaking English or Greek, it doesn't matter. It's easier to put an extra N to finalize the word in front of it. So ekosi, isai becomes ekosin isai. So that's where an example of it is shown. And some manuscripts have that in, some of them don't. If you remember, the earlier manuscripts are all capital. There's no individual spaces in between the words. And something like this can easily be done where you can transfer that nu to the next word, and that might actually change the word itself. There is one textual variant where that's the case, where the movable nu was put onto the next word because they added the space. They put the space in the wrong place. Now you can look at that. It doesn't make any sense. This is, I think, it changed children to horse, and you're thinking, what? What are they talking about here? It's obviously talking about children. It does make a sense. So this type of variant, this type here, this letters and spellings, makes over 99% of the variants in the New Testament. So remember, we're whittling that 40,000, 400,000 down quite a bit to say, okay, it's obvious what's going here. Transposition, and this is the last, another type of variant, and this example of that would be Jesus Christ versus Christ Jesus. That's a variance. Does it make a difference? No.
No, not at all.
Not at all. It's not like, first name's a title. So it can be transposed. It doesn't make a difference. So here are some textual variants. This is something that we could dig into in another live stream. Again, we're going long on this one, so I'm not going to be looking at each individual one. You could almost have a live stream just for one of these passages by itself and say, does it make a difference? Does it not? And I'm not going to read through all of these, but I will mention a couple of them on the bottom. These are the bigger ones. John 7:53 through 8:11. Now, these are the 12 verse variants that we were talking about, just two of them. And I believe this is one of them. The story of the woman caught in adultery. And then Mark 16:9 through 20, found in the majority of manuscripts. The two earliest manuscripts don't have it. So here's the question. The whole thing about the woman caught in adultery, this is an illustration of a biblical principle, a doctrine that is being applied here. Even if you were to take this text out and say this is something that's added, you are not changing any doctrine in the New Testament. Doctrine is a teaching. So we're not changing any teaching. You're just being shown an application of that teaching. So I think we can say that textual variants do not change any major doctrine of Christianity. And I would challenge anyone to show me where they would change any doctrine, not just major doctrine, any doctrine at all. The Greek New Testament that we have today is 99.99% reflective of the original, and that slight percentage is just questionable. We're not sure, and this is where these things are. And of that very small percentage, it doesn't make any difference. I do want to say we're going to take a look at comments here. But before we jump into comments and talk about some shout outs, some of the references that we use, I really want to show you guys where some of these references are very good. We have coming up next week, and this is like
nefarious.
So different from textual variants and some of the things we're talking about in theology. But we want to take a look at a movie review. This was a little tough to say if we're actually going to be looking at this or not, because this movie is a little bit hard in terms of it's actually classified as a horror. And say, Christians talking about horror? Yeah, because there's some horror scary stuff in the Bible. When we talk about demon possession and other stuff that are going on, you look at the book of Revelation. If you were to put that into a movie form, would that be rated R? Probably. Some of the stuff that happens in the Old Testament, would that be rated R? The crucifixion of Christ, would it be rated R? Yes, it would, because of the blood and gore that's on it. Isaiah said he was so marred and broken, we would have not even recognized him as being a human being on the cross. It was that bad. The crucifixion was that bad. So these are all questions that could be asked. We can look at this movie and say, is there anything good about this? It's talking specifically about demon possession. Now, how close does this come to the scriptural definition of demonic possession? We'll take a look at that. And is this movie worth watching? We'll look at that on Tuesday and answer that question.
Good, I haven't watched it yet. I'm behind.
It might be a bit of a surprise for you. So I'm going to put on the magic textual reading glasses here and see what else we have in the. I still have to put this back up. Do it.
I'm proud of that. We need an audio clip. You need an audio clip like I have.
We do. We do.
And you can just play it on the side.
And real life called me, and I couldn't avoid continue awesome. Okay, so he's taken off on this, and ask grandmom, she confirms.
Oh, yeah. Ask grandmom, she confirms.
Okay.
About the movable.
Oh, the movable new. Yes. Okay, very good. I'm glad you're here to translate some of these for me, because I've
been doing this for years. So
okay, yes. Okay, so Mattis last. Do you think possession is possible if you believe in God? Oh, some of these good questions. we're going to leave that for our nefarious review, and we'll talk about. So we appreciate all the comments that we had. This is a deep subject, and we're going to be going over more about biblical preservation. Hopefully, this wasn't anything that shook your faith, but helped confirm what you saw there. This is God allows us to make mistakes, and scribes would have made mistakes along the way. The question is, can we, through the study of textual criticism, come up with what we believe is a pretty good, firm foundation for what's there? And I believe the answer is yes. And we're looking at, well over 100 years of textual criticism confirming that. And it's an ongoing research. And I do want to, before we wrap up, I did want to do a shout out to some the sources that we had for this. We had some infographics that were there. We had some, I think it's this one. There we go. So we had some infographics. We also had other centers for research. So these graphics here that we had earlier on, there's a I wouldn't say there's a ton, but there's many more to come. This is all from this site here, Wesley Huff. I contacted him yesterday, got permission to use his material. He said, "Oh, please do." And so I want to give him a good shout out. This is Apologetics Canada. He does some great presentations. He has his own website. The link is in the description below.
He has testimony that good things come from Canada. Just to let you know.
Yes. We will not forget our Canadian brothers here. We also have this man here. A lot of the information that we had in today's presentation was based on research done by Dr. Daniel Wallace. He has some great videos out. He also has this institute for preserving New Testament manuscripts. Link is in the description for this video as well. This is an ongoing research, and they're worthy of your donations. If you want to donate to this cause, it'd be fantastic. They are basically taking these texts that are there, cataloging them, digitizing them, doing research on all of them. So this is giving us more and more information that we can then say, okay, what was the original text? What was that based on? And then finally, the New Testament virtual manuscript room. This is in the University of Munster in Germany. They have been involved in an extension of Dr. Wallace's work, preserving manuscripts for, I think since the 1800s, pulling them all together. And they do, like over here on the side, they're showing you what the current status is of getting these done, like cataloging and digitizing and so forth, what each different type of, whether it's papyrus, it's codex, lectionaries, we didn't even talk about lectionaries and so forth, what the status is on that. Great. I mean, all this stuff is right here. All this information is open. I would love to see Muslims do this.
It wouldn't take very much.
Why
Google search.
Okay. But critical research, taking a look, bring this all together, doing this archaeological work. So again, enjoy this time with you guys. Looking forward to the next live stream. We got nefarious, and then we're digging more into the preservation of scripture here. So
No